So Matthew chapter 7, we're going to start reading in verse 24. But before we get into that, y'all know I'm not real big on like titles of sermons. Some guys that's like a real hook for them. This sermon, it's going to be a little bit of a hook, okay? So, and it's just fun to say, the danger of the doppelganger. So we all know what the doppelganger is. And I got one that I found this recently. This happened on social media here a couple of days. It's great if you find stuff like this. So for those of you who don't know, this is Woody Harrelson, and this was some baby named Cora, and they were like, man, looks just like Woody Harrelson, and so it's awesome because Woody Harrelson actually reached out. He posted this on social media, it starts going viral. Everybody's laughing. It's so good, right? And then Woody Harrelson, writes this little poem. And he says, "You're an adorable child, flattered to be compared. You have a wonderful smile. I just wish I had your hair," which is great. It's awesome to see Woody Harrelson. And what I was saying about this is the danger of the doppelganger is yes, this baby looks so much like Woody Harrelson and has that smile that Woody Harrelson's one of those. Well, he's got one of those smiles when you see him smile, you smile, as we pop this up, not everybody just smiles, right? It is what it is. And so, just because the baby looks like Woody Harrelson, though, can you imagine this baby playing Woody Harrelson's character in The Hunger Games? Right? It just wouldn't have been the same. It wouldn't have worked, would it? It wouldn't have worked. Come on, right? You look the same. It looks like the real thing to some extent, but it's not the real thing. You get this little baby Cora, and she would look cute, and it would be great in the movie, but it wouldn't fulfill the role, right? Imagine here, pull out one of the old ones. Imagine this baby in White Man Can't Jump, right? How's she going to fulfill that role? Baby, that's not going to work. It's not going to work. So something can look alike, right? It can be a look-alike. But if it's not the real thing, it can't fulfill what that real thing can fulfill. And there's a danger there. And there's a warning that Jesus is giving to us in this text about things that look like the real thing. The doppelganger. They look like the real thing. It's not the real thing. And so, if you found your way to Matthew chapter 7, verse 24, say word. Word. Let's get into the word so the word can get into us. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain fell, so opposition from the top. The rivers rose, opposition from the bottom, and the winds blew, opposition from the side. So here it is. There's going to be challenges from above, below, and from the sides. That's from all sides. You're going to get hit from all sides. Right? All sides. And it pounded that house. Yet it didn't collapse because its foundation was on the rock. It was built on the real thing. No lookalikes here. This was built on the real thing. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain fell, opposition from the top. Rivers rose, opposition from the bottom. Winds blew, opposition from the side. And pounded that house. And it collapsed. It collapsed with a great crash. Now when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, because he was teaching them like one who had authority and not like their scribes. This is the word of the Lord. Let's pray together. Father, we love you. Speak this truth into our heart. Let us see afresh today what your word says about a foundation that is rock solid and what it really is, and what the lookalikes can be and what they're not. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. So the first thing that I want us to think about in these first 24 through 27, this first section, is this idea. It's kind of the idea that I've already shown to you. A substitute can be good or it can be bad, but it's not the real thing. A substitute can be good, it can be bad, but it can't be, or it's not the real thing. It's not that. It's not that. Like, maybe it's a good thing. Wasn't that, but it's not the real Woody Harrelson, right? It's not the real thing. And this is exactly what Jesus is getting at. We have a tendency to substitute the real thing for the easy thing. The real thing for the comfortable thing. The real thing for the distraction thing. We could go down the list, right? The real thing for the culturally relevant thing. And the list goes on and on and on. Just to let you know, we're going to read a lot of John Stott today. We're going to have John Stott at the beginning, John Stott in the middle, John Stott at the end. Because, listen, what we could have done is just came in here and read John Stott and what he thinks about this, and we would have all walked away with life. So I was like, you know what? You can't say it better than that, so I'm just going to let him say it, okay? But here's what John Stott says here right at the beginning. Here's a quote. The Bible is a dangerous book to read, and that the church is a dangerous society to join. For in reading the Bible, we hear the words of Christ, and in joining the church, we say we believe in Christ. As a result, we belong to the company described by Jesus as both hearing his teaching and calling him Lord. Our membership, therefore, lays upon us the serious responsibility of ensuring that we know and what we say is translated into what we do. What we know and what we say is translated into what we do. That's why the Bible is a dangerous book to read and the church is a dangerous society to join. And so what we have a tendency, since it is dangerous and it is challenging, we can substitute the words of Jesus and the teachings of Jesus for all these other things. And here's what's cool about this. And y'all know I try when I preach this, I not only try to teach you what the Bible teaches, but I also try to teach you how to read the Bible. And so I'm going to show you, I have these two passages laid up before one another. So go right here, okay? So this is pretty cool. Okay, so if you look here, these are side by side, verse 24 and 25, and verse 26 and verse 27. And what you see is that they're exactly the same, except for the things highlighted in yellow. And so literally what the author, Matthew, has done is he's substituted in things. Okay, he's put one here, you have these words of mine, acts on them, and that's replaced in the next one, or substituted with doesn't act. Wise is substituted with foolish. Rock is substituted with sand. And then didn't collapse. It did collapse. And foundation was on the rock, a great crash. You see how important what you put in those places is. When you substitute, the language is exactly word for word the same. It's just substituted these things. And substitutes matter. Substitutes matter. What you substitute, if in fact you do substitute, it does change the results. It's very clear. And so we have all of these things that we need to be aware of. So this is one way. What you should do in your Bible right now or when you get home, go back and read. Go back through here and highlight these things or circle them and acts, doesn't act. And this is how you can compare and contrast. That's what the Bible and the Hebrew meditation literature is wanting you to do. Compare and contrast, to think deeply about what's happening and what's going on within the text. And what's the strategy that's going on within the author's context, and why is he saying it these different ways? And what the author, Matthew, is trying to communicate to us in Jesus' words here is he's trying to show us that a substitute is not the real thing. And it can be extremely, extremely dangerous. Now, what are some of the substitutes that we find in our modern? Well, one of these is cultural alignment. We can just align with our culture. Our host culture is what some current commentators would call it, our host culture, the culture in which we live in. Okay? And right now we live in a hustle culture. Right? Go get yours. Go, 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 go. Busy, busy, busy. Progress, progress, progress. More, 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 more. Have you figured, if you're like a junior in high school, have you figured out your future? Do you know what you're going to do? Let's go, let's go. Make that decision. Let's go, let's go. It's time to get on your path and get going and get going. Right? What's your career going to be? towards. You're working towards college. You get to college, it's like, man, if I can just quit school and be done with school for a little while and just get into my career, and then I can do it. Then you get in your career, and you're like stage 1, level 1. You're like, man, if I could just work to this place, if I could just work to that level, right? If I could climb the ladder to this level, then I'll have it. And then you get to there, and you're like, well, I don't really like how this company's working, so I'm going to transfer over here. And if I can just go long enough, get my 401k big enough, then I can retire, and then I'm going to live a good life. Then you die. Hopefully not, but what I'm saying is that you get my picture, right? Your whole life, you're hustling for the next moment, and you're never really present and content. And Paul says, man, I found it that I'm content no matter where I'm at. I'm content in all places, all positions, all areas of life. Whether rich or poor, whether hungry or satisfied and full. I found a way to be content. Right now we live in a host culture that is driving the hustle into us. And I'm not saying it's not okay and good to hustle. Like, you should strive after good things. But if that becomes the thing, the foundation and the rock of your life, you substituted a false thing for the real thing. Some families, I know this is wild to say, but some families substitute their children for the real thing. In their lives, and are we to serve and sacrifice for our children? Absolutely, that's what good parenting is. But if the family unit begins to revolve around the children and only the children, and they become the primary thing, and Jesus isn't the primary thing, you've substituted. And children are good. That's why a substitute can be a good and a bad thing. Right? But if you substitute, it's not the real thing. And its way leads to the same place. It collapses into a great crash. And then you have the ideologies of our day, right? Ideologies around sexual ethics and the unborn and economics and government. And all of those things. I'm not going to go into all those details. We're aware of them, but it's easy when we see people. And maybe we ourselves have taken these ideologies, these things that are popular in our culture, and we've instituted or even adapted parts of them into our own foundation. And listen, it's a substitute and it's not the real thing. And it leads to a great crash. Leads to a great crash. I think part of one of the things that I've been talking about is it's ease, right? We have a capacity and ability to align our lives around ease. What's the easiest? What's the most comfortable? And that's a real temptation. It's a real temptation in our world and in our life that we would just move to the easiest thing. I think this is very dangerous for our younger generation, who is still trying to figure life out and what their purpose is and all of those things and what foundation and rock they will build their life on. But ease is being thrown at them. Entertainment is being thrown at them over and over and over and over. But at the same time, our older generation is falling into it too. So here's the deal, man. Like if you have one of these in your pocket, then the danger of ease and unintentionality and distraction is alive and well, like you've never known, like the world's never seen. And so we have to be careful and understand that we all have the capacity to replace, substitute God's Word and the foundation of Jesus with a whole lot of other things. It's not, hear me, it's not just those people out there. It's the people in the mirror. We always need to be aware of that. One author said, neither an intellectual knowledge of Him, Jesus, nor a verbal profession, though both are essential in themselves, can ever be a substitute for obedience. It's a knowledge and a doing that Jesus is getting at and where he begins. So we can't just say it, yeah, that's what I believe, but then actually in our doing, our life revolves around something entirely different. That is substituting in verse 26 and verse 27 is our result. It is. So, what makes the difference? Well, the difference is how deep you dig. So dig deep. The difference is in how deep you dig. So dig deep. Dig deep. Really deep. If you want to find the rock, if you want to get to the rocks, you got to dig deep. Anybody who's been in construction of any type, like that, we know this. Like, you have to dig deep in order to find the deep-seated rocks that are there. Deep, deep digging, and it's not easy. Here's one of the things in where I think the church, so I went at the culture and those things. So now I kind of want to talk about the church a little bit specifically. And this is my context, it's Western culture. So if somebody walks down the line from somewhere else, like this may not be as relevant to you, but Western culture, what we've had is a model of transformation and formation, what we would call spiritual formation. A couple of weeks ago, I showed a diagram up here about a triangle and how we are always being spiritually formed. We're always experiencing spiritual formation at all times, right? The question isn't, are you being spiritually formed? The question is, who is spiritually forming you and what is spiritually forming you, right? And so we looked at unintentional and intentional. And here's a part of why digging deep has been a challenge. And why I'm afraid in our churches, many people, and many of us, and this has been my experience as a young believer, like trying to figure this out, trying to dig deep. It was tough, and part of it was the actual model for formation that we were using. So I'm going to show you a model, and this is Pete Scazzero lays this out in a book called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, which is phenomenal. Okay? And so here's the idea. I'm going to kind of watch you. This is what some would call a traditional approach or traditional model to spiritual formation. Right? Conversion, right? It's the cross, okay? So that's just conversion. Get saved, right? Get them saved. Okay? And then the next thing is get them in church. Alright? Both good things, gotta have them. Amen? It's good approach so far. Great approach. Alright? Then once you get us in church, then get them connected to a group or something, get them serving, get them giving, and then through that, you impact the world. Now, many of us, and I showed the men this last year, so it should be like familiar to the men in here, but many of you, you're like, yeah, like this is the model of church that I've experienced and have went through. Now, there's nothing wrong with this model. Here's what I would say about it. It doesn't go far enough. It doesn't go far enough. Now, there's like 5% of people where it does go far enough because you don't have to give them anything. They're just those go-getters who just go get it on their own, you know? So this works for those people, all right? And those tend to emerge as leaders. And so some of y'all, you're sitting here thinking, you're like, oh, yeah, well, that worked for me. Well, you're probably that 5%, you know, that just goes out and goes. But for a lot of people, we need a little bit more. We need a little bit more direction. And so Pete Scazzero kind of lays this out. But here's what I say. There's nothing wrong with this model. And so what I'm not saying is bashing all the churches that you've been to or you've experienced, or even this church before I got here. Okay? All right? Not bashing. I just don't think it went far enough. So what we want to try to do is try to figure out, and so really, before you may have your guard up, you're like, I don't know, I think this does go far enough. Here's the deal though, right? Like how many of us have experienced church hurt in our lives? Hey, like I said this like 2 weeks ago. If you ain't raising your hand, or your mental hand, the mental hand in your head didn't go up, you haven't been in church for a year and a half. Right? Like you haven't experienced and actually been a part of church like at least a year and a half. Because if you've been in any church for a year and a half, you've experienced some sort of hurt to some level, some degree. Right? So like what have I said? I've said up here multiple times to say, like, hey, if you're coming here to find the perfect pastor in the perfect church, well, keep looking. If you're expecting me never to say something that's going to offend you or hurt you, I'll just go ahead and apologize in front here ahead of time, because I probably will, probably have. And the Lord's working on me, and I'm a work in progress. You guys are a work in progress, okay? So church hurt happens. So the other thing I'm not saying is that the process I'm going to show you here in a second is going to alleviate all church hurt. I'm not saying that either. I'm not saying that either. What I'm saying is, I think, and from my experience, some church hurt is tied to this traditional. You could go back and we could say, well, if we went a little bit deeper, we could have removed some of the hurt that happened. How many of you have ever experienced spiritual stagnation or backsliding in your life? Right? To some level, we all raise our hand. It's like, okay. Like, can some of that be tied to this? Because we haven't went deep enough and found the rock to where we're not in it now. There's obviously times in the desert, and that's not a place of stagnation. That's actually a place of growth. If you read it, get into some of the monastic fathers, they lay that out really well. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like real backsliding, you know? That's the old term, all right? The new term would be like falling away, whatever. I don't even know what the new term is. The old Southern Baptist preacher would say backsliding. You done backslid. Right? I don't know if some of y'all are familiar, some of the young people, maybe deconstruction is a term, it's a catchword, buzzword for today. Here's what I believe. I believe a lot of deconstruction that is happening in our day with our young believers in the faith is tied, at least in part, to this model. Because it don't go deep enough. The last thing is, biblical illiteracy is at an all-time high. I think part of that can be tied back to this model of formation, spiritual formation. Because here's what happens when this is the goal. Conversion is the focus rather than disciples. And Jesus didn't tell us to go make converts. He told us to go make disciples. Teaching them to obey all that I have taught you. That's a strong thing to say. And the other part is it's information focused rather than transformation focused. And here's where our host culture plays into this. We have all been influenced by what's called the Cartesian influence. Rene Descartes, who said, I think, therefore I am. And so we live in a culture that's that. And if anyone has any problems, any issues, the reason is because they don't have enough information. They haven't been given the information. And we've swam in that culture for years and years and years, in generations upon generations. And so what we thought was if you give the people the right information, then information turns to action. And Jesus' teaching here is like, clearly that's not always true. Don't just be hearers, receivers of the right information, but be doers. Because if you're just a hearer, then your house is built on something completely different. Saying you substituted the real thing for the false thing. And its result is a great crash. Y'all heard me reference this a little bit, but Neil Postman wrote a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death. And here's the main premise of that book. What he finally gets to is, here's the deal, man. We're consuming more information than we can possibly put into action. We live in a time of information overload. Absolutely. And we are consuming more information than our brain and our physical capacity, mental capacity has to actually put into action. Which is then inevitably resulting in a comfortability or okayness. That's my word, it's not a real word. Okayness. You get what I'm saying though, right? We're now okay with receiving information and doing nothing with it. Because we're receiving so much information we can't even act on the majority of what we are poured into with. And so now it's just become information for information's sake. So, the question is, what do we do with that? So, clearly the problem in the world is not that we don't have the right information or access to the right information. The problem is, we don't act on the information that's true. We don't align This is what Jesus is saying, and it's still true today. People say, the Bible is not relevant. Fake news. That's not true. It's unbelievably relevant. It just may say it in a way that doesn't sit right with you, or that you don't necessarily fully understand. Just part of it. It's intrigue. It draws you in. So the question is, how do we dig deep? Like if the difference is in digging deep, dig deep, how do we do that? Well, here's another approach, which is Pete Pizzero lays it out like this, right? This is transparent. And look, conversion, get them in church. Like, we're for that. We're for that. That's, yes, do that. But then, once a person gets in community, what we want to see is deep spiritual formation. Deep spiritual formation. Yeah, we want you to give. Yes, we want you to serve. But that's not, we want you to get to know Jesus. We want you to be with Jesus, become like Jesus, and do what Jesus did. The way we would phrase that around here is walk the way of Jesus. Be with Jesus, become like Jesus, do what Jesus did. That's what it means to follow a rabbi. And so that's what we're shooting for. And here is the model that kind of points to that and kind of just opens your mind. It's like, okay, what is going on in this? So yes, we want conversion. To make a disciple, one must be converted. That's just part of the deal. Yes, God has called every one of us to attend the church. You cannot be a fully functioning, faithful disciple of Jesus and not be a part of a local community gathering together, worshiping, and serving the Lord in the world. It's impossible. You can go back like a year and a half ago and preach a sermon on the doctrine of the church. Okay? I'd love for you to go check that out if that's confusing for you. And then the iceberg here is the digging deep. This is the digging deep part. It's the hard work of spiritual formation, of getting down to the rock. Psychologist and analyst Carl Jung talked about the shadow side of yourself. And we all have this shadow side. One of the things that he laid out was that a person couldn't actually be a good person until they understood that they had a shadow. Or we could just say that a person can't be really a good person until they understand they're a monster. You got to understand and know the dark side of yourself. You got to know that you have a potential, right? Because otherwise it's just naivety. And naive people are not moral people. They just don't know any better. So Jesus, throughout this entire thing, has been pointing to the brokenness and the darkness of humanity in so many different ways. And he's taken it a step further. He's like, it's not just in your actions. Like, y'all got to realize it. It's in your heart, because it's from your heart where you act. And so Jesus is all about changing our hearts. Changing our hearts. Getting to the depths of it. So Jesus says, like, it's even darker than just the shadow. Like, the shadow's in your heart. It's in there. And so, Ruth Haley Barton takes this up in a book called Invitation to a Journey. Talking about spiritual formation as a journey in your entire life. This whole journey of exploring, and what we would say here, that's an iceberg if you didn't get that picture, right? And so it's like what's underneath the water. What's underneath what's visible, and then what's invisible. What's invisible. And so she talks about this, and she says, listen, what we have this is so brilliant. Ruth had so brilliant. She said, what we have a tendency to do, and what the traditional model has a tendency to do, is mold and spiritually form the good parts about you. Like if you're a kind person, then we're going to continue to form that and show you why you're kind, and where that comes from, and where the heart comes from. But we can consistently live in such a way where we hide those dark parts. And so what ends up happening is when you hide those dark parts, they don't actually get transformed. And we think what we need to do is just push those dark parts aside. But keep the shadow back, and that's what living faithfully for the Lord looks like. But it's not. When they stay hidden, listen, they will manifest themselves in that's what, like, it says that. We'll go back to Genesis 3. You're welcome. Genesis 4. We'll go to Genesis 4. Right, it says that there's a waiting for the opportune moment. That shadow, that dark side, that broken part of you is sitting back like a serpent ready to strike, waiting for the opportune moment. And if you don't deal with it and allow God to transform that, the only way God can transform it is through revealing it, bringing it out into the open, right? This is the digging deep part. You got to get through the dirt and the nasty to get down to the good part. And you do that work, and then God can actually transform that thing. But if you just hide it and bury it, eventually what it does is it manifests itself in a tragic way in your life. And you know what it sounds like, and you know what it feels like, and you know what? You've seen it happen, and let's just use pastors as an example. How many, like every 2 months it feels like a pastor coming out, and here we find out the shadow has emerged, and this tragic event, and what should run through your mind is, oh, a foundation built on sand. They didn't do the deep work in that area, and it manifests in a great crash happening. This is exactly what happened. And it's not just pastors. They're just on a platform where it's so visible. It's every one of us. It's every one of us. We have to get beneath the surface. And here's the deal. This is a life and death matter. I've said this to our men before. You don't believe me? Ask the people on the Titanic how important what's beneath the water is. It's literally life and death. And that is a great spiritual metaphor for the reality of our lives. We better do the hard work of digging deep. And let me tell you what John Stott said at the very beginning. The Bible is a dangerous book. The church is a dangerous society to join. Because what Jesus teaches us is that we let people beneath the waterline to see. Now, at the proper context and the right situations, absolutely. Getting beneath the surface and digging deep, revealing what's below the waterline is a life and death matter. Because here's the deal. All of this, the context here that Matthew is referring to and Jesus is referring to comes right off the previous context, which is talking about judgment in the last judgment. And so it continues here as well. And so when he talks about the rain falling and the rivers rising and the pounding and the winds blowing, it's not just about this life. It's also about the judgment that will come. You will be judged on all sides. There's a judgment day coming. Craig Bloomberg says it this way: Judgment day will come like a flood to disclose which spiritual structures will endure. Preliminary crisis may also reveal authentic and inauthentic spirituality. In fact, often only in times of crisis can one's faith be truly proven. You want to see your faith truly proven? Let's see it in times of crisis. And that's what it becomes. We see what kind of foundation is there. So naturally, what we will experience, this is why the book is a dangerous book and the church is a dangerous society, because God is willing to allow suffering in his people to establish his rockness in their lives, so that they will be a picture for the world of what's true and right. It's challenging. And through that, we impact the world even greater. Jesus did a deep work in 11 guys, and they turned the world upside down. So what if we picked one? I don't want 12. That would be, I feel like that would just be really bold of me to try to disciple 12 people the same amount Jesus did. Like, no, I'm not that great of a disciple maker. Give me 3, you know? Give me 1. Who's your 1? Who's your 1 that you're pouring into, is pouring into you, and that things are being exposed in your own heart before they become, as they're still a shadow, as they're just a serpent ready to strike, not after they've already struck and caused a great crash in your life. This is the approach that we here at Smoky View are shooting after. And we've not figured this out yet. We're trying to figure out how to make this work in our context. But that's what we're shooting for. Here's the deal. Surface level type of resilience do you want to have in this life? What type of resilience do you want to have? If you're shooting for surface level responses, listen, you cannot not respond to Jesus. Jesus' teachings here don't allow us that. We have to respond. So the question is, if you're just going to give it a surface level response and just let it all be real surface level, then your resilience is going to be surface level. This is what this text is teaching. It's a great crash that comes. It's a great crash that comes. And this is where it gets challenging, because before the great crash comes and before the storms and the rivers rise and the winds blow, they look the same. They look the same. Doppelganger. But the suffering will reveal. The struggle will reveal what's true and what's not. And so the question is, just like it is up in the first part of the morning, narrow gate or wide gate? Rock or sand? What substitute have you put in place for the real rock? Have you been surface level? Because surface level response results in surface level resilience. And then these amazing words, but really short, in verse 28 and 29. Jesus finished these things, and the crowds were astonished at his teaching, because he was teaching them like one who had authority and not like their scribes. Not like their scribes. Here's the deal. This is why it says not like their scribes. One author said it this way: the scribes had an addiction to the past. They never spoke on their own authority. Scribes always, and rabbis of the day always, what they would do is they would use the same strategy Jesus said. You've heard it said, fill in the blank. And then they would say, but this historical figure said this, and I'm using his authority. So the scribes of the day always taught based on the authority of those in the past. Now, Jesus was also different than the prophets, because here's what the prophets did. Where one author said that scribes were addicted to the past, this one said that prophets were addicted to the present, because they were right in the moment of their lives and what was going on in their culture, and they would say what? Thus says the Lord. They would speak directly to a specific moment in time, directly to specific people in that time, or a group of people in that time, and that's what the overwhelming majority of prophecy in the Bible is when the prophets speak. So they had an addiction to the present, and that's all good. That was their role, and there's nothing bad. But here's what Jesus does in this text, the entire Sermon on the Mount. What you'll notice is he doesn't base his justification on anybody from the past. Now, he quotes the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, absolutely. And he's not necessarily focused in on the future and saying, hey, this is what the Lord's saying in this moment, in this time. He's speaking, and he's saying, this is what God's been saying all along. And you know what? Here's how Jesus says it. Scribes, addiction to the past. Prophets, addiction to the present. Thus saith the Lord. This is what so-and-so said in the past. Jesus said, I say to you. I say to you. I'm going to flip through here. So I went through. Here's what you should do. You go back through the Sermon on the Mount and circle all these. You go to chapter 5, verse 22. Chapter 5, verse 26. Chapter 5, verse 28. Chapter 5, verse 32. Chapter 5, verse 34. Chapter 5, verse 39. Chapter 5, verse 44. Chapter 6, verse 5. Chapter 6, verse 16. Chapter 6, verse 25. Chapter 6, verse 29. Get the point? Then in verse 12 of chapter 6, he says, therefore, whatever you want others to do for you, do also the same for them. So this is Jesus' words, and then he says, for this is the law and the prophets. He just said he summed up in one word the law and the prophets. Just himself. So, spoke with one as authority in such a way where he was like, I am the authority. I am the authority. Jesus is it. So it's like, Jesus, how can you look to us and talk to us about these things and talking about, oh, my house will crash, talking about my life will crash. How can you be so judgmental about these things? Jesus is saying, I am the authority. I am him. John Stott says it this way. So certain was he of the truth and the validity of his teaching that he said human wisdom and human folly were to be assessed by people's reaction to it. The only wise people there are, he implied, are those who build their lives on his words by obeying them. All others by rejecting his teaching are fools. This is what Jesus did, his teaching. Which obviously is in line with Hebrew Scriptures, from Genesis to Malachi. Absolutely. But here's my point. This destroys the old adage that Jesus is just a good moral teacher. He doesn't leave that open to us. Jesus as a good moral teacher is not, you can't, and this is typically the Sermon on the Mount is the text where people go and be like, oh yeah, the Sermon on the Mount's great. Those moralistic teachings, those ethical teachings, those are good. I'm for those. But if you read it to the end, and when you get to what Jesus says at the end, you can't just say he's a good moral teacher. He says he's the judge. So Jesus has authority as a teacher, but he also has authority as the judge. Look at chapter 7, verse 22. It says, they'll come to me on that day, meaning the day of the Lord, and he says, I will announce to them. I will announce to them. I will announce to them. He is the judge. Furthermore, Jesus is the authority as Lord, the ultimate authority. In verse 22 again, he says, on that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, drive out demons in your name, do many miracles in your name? Then he doesn't correct them for calling him Lord. He says, I. He's accepting, yes, that I am the Lord. You're speaking. You will be judged by me, the Lord. Jesus is not leaving it open to just some good moral teaching. Furthermore, in Matthew chapter 3, you see this is this whole scene where Jesus is baptized. And the Father from heaven speaks and says, this is my Son. So Jesus has authority based on being the Son of God. By words of the Father from heaven. But at the same time, that same scene, and we've talked about this before, the prophecy said that the one who would call out, the one that called out in the wilderness and paved the way, in the Old Testament, the prophecies would say that he would pave the way for Yahweh. He would pave the way for Yahweh. Then you see John the Baptist in all of the gospel narratives put forth as that one in the wilderness, paving the way for Yahweh. And then what happens next? The very next scene is Jesus is baptized. You see the Spirit, you see the Father, and you see Jesus, Yahweh. Jesus is God. He has authority as God. Here's the deal. Jesus' authority is validated. All others, I hate that I put it this way. All others are dilapidated. But it was on the house theme, you know? It's going with the house theme. No matter what authority comes in your life and tries to tell you there's something different, this, and how they argue it and do creative things. No. There's only one rock, and it takes deep digging to get to that. It takes real spiritual formation, being with Jesus, becoming like Jesus, and doing what Jesus did in order to establish oneself in such a way that you are in line with Christ. And that one day we can stand before him and he says, well done, good and faithful servant. And listen, it's hard to follow the authority of Jesus sometimes. Amen? This is why we got to dig deep. Like, it's hard work. It's a dangerous game. But it's worth it. Because Jesus says, the wise man's house, it didn't collapse. The wise man's life didn't fall apart. Say it this way, the wise man's house building your house, building your life on anything, 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 anything other than the authority of Jesus and the teachings of Jesus will result in everything you love coming to a great crash. It's not my warning, it's Jesus' warning. And He loves you. This is not unloving. Jesus loves you more than anybody. He proved it. He gave His life for you. I don't know that I would give my daughter for you. I don't know. I hope that the Lord will work on me in one day where I would be that type of person where I could give up my own child for you. I'm just saying it right now. I don't think I'm there. But God did that. He gave His blood for you and me. Gave it up. Jesus proved it. So, here's two things I want us to do this week. So here we get to the practical. Okay, I get it, it's tough. Okay? I get it, it's hard. I get it. So I want you to do. I want you to go home with your family, or by yourself. If you don't have a family, do this by yourself as an individual. Read straight through the Sermon on the Mount. We've preached through it, and what I want you, I don't want you to get like hung up in each spot. Like, just as you're reading, hopefully like messages and things that we've talked about over the last 14 weeks now will like come into your mind as you're reading it. You'll start remembering things. You'll start moving through it. And then I want you to get to the end of these 3 warnings, and then I want you just to really tap in. Be like, okay, is this what my life looks like? Do I look like a narrow gate, narrow road kind of person? Do I look like a foundation on the rock kind of person? And if not, what have I substituted? What doppelganger have I bought into? May have a cute smile, just like Woody Harrelson. But it's not the real thing. It's not the real thing. Write it down. Action. Action. Put action to these words. And I'm giving you some action steps. So let's do it this week. Let's really, really do it. And then I want you to do another thing. I want you to look through, as you read through it, maybe circle the ones that you're the worst at. Circle the ones that you're the worst at. You get to like go in the second mile, you know, you're like, pass, bad at that one. That's how, you know. I'm not going the extra mile. Or giving, or prayer, maybe some prayer, you know. Or you know what, I have anger in my heart. Maybe that's the one that's getting you. Find the one that you're least good at, because there's a shadow there that's just waiting. And it's waiting for one of two things, either to be transformed or to tragically break your life. And so write it down and think a couple of things. Why am I not good at this? Here's what I'll let you in on the lie a little bit here. What you'll discover is probably one of the reasons you're not good at this has something to do with your family history and your personality traits. Self-awareness is a really good thing. And then go through the Bible and say, okay, this is one area, but what does the whole Bible say about this? Get a biblical context of it. And then confess it to the Lord. And part of what you're doing in highlighting it is a confession. It's God, this is an area in my life. I'm missing the mark, which is the word for sin. And I see that this is a shadow side of me. This is what's beneath the surface, and it can break me. And then think about what in response to that, what would be the ideal you in accordance to the word? Because anger, okay, I'm not a person of anger, but I'm a person who forgives very easily. That's the opposite. I'm a person that is quick to forgive. Okay, what does that look like? Specifically in the areas of my life where I'm really holding on to this anger and bitterness. What does the ideal look like? And then just take one step towards that ideal. Just take one step. I'm not asking you to change your anger forever, or whatever that is, but take one step. And what you will find is exactly what is in chapter 7 of Jesus' teachings in Matthew. Seek, you will find. Knock, the door will be open. God will show you the first step. And then He'll show you the next step. And then He'll show you the next step. If we can learn to just be content right where we are and seek God and ask Him to change our circumstances. Amen? Do the deep dig. Dive. Deep dives. Don't be afraid. And do it in context with family, people who love you. And community groups. Our growth groups here. As Stu comes, I'm going to read this quote. Another John Stott. Told you we was going to begin, do it in the middle, end with it. Here it is. That is why the sermon's conclusion is so appropriate. As Jesus sketches the two ways, the narrow and the broad, and the two buildings, the rock and the sand, it would be impossible to exaggerate the importance of the choice between them. Since one way leads to life, while the other ends in destruction. And one building is secure while the other is overwhelmed with disaster. Far more momentous than the choice even of a life work or a life partner. So, even more important than your career choice and your spouse choice is the choice of